Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 346, cover dated August 1997. So the cover is by Joe Madureira, inked by Tim Townsend. It features Spider-Man up against Marrow, a recently introduced new mutant with a connection to the Morlocks. And the cover is very, very dynamic. Great action poses by Madureira. Of course, there's no background there, so that would have speeded up the process of completing this cover. There's a lot of text on the cover as well. You can see we've got this banner for Marvel Comics as a whole, the world's greatest comics, something about zero tolerance. The creator credits there now as well, so that's something that Marvel has taken to doing, copying Image comics in that regard, giving the creators a credit on the cover. And also we've got lots of text about the scene we're looking at with the X-Men missing. Marrow goes wild, and did we mention a certain web slinger guest stars too? Well, there he is, front and center, featuring your new guide to the Marvel Universe. So quite a lot of text on this. We've got in the cover corner box the current X-Men featuring an Uncanny X-Men. You can see them there as rendered by Joe Madureira. But what is intriguing is, with the exception of Gambit, they don't turn up in this comic at all. The focus is primarily on Spider-Man. This is like a Spider-Man story more than anything else. And very clearly Joe Madureira wanting to draw Spider-Man and being accommodated in that regard. So this guide to the Marvel Universe, we're getting a guide to the X-Men there, so details on the different characters you can see, a blurb about the X-Men generally. You've got a mixture of art from different artists there, Madureira, but also others. And you have got, in effect, a previously, last time an X-Men section there too. So I think that kind of thing is a good idea for new readers, rather than having everything shoehorned into narrative captions and in particular the dialogue of characters, to give all this up front for any prospective new readers. So we get a really dynamic splash page there, as you can see. Again, Madureira, I'm pretty sure, probably asked Lobdell whether they couldn't work in the Hulk and have a Spider-Man versus the Hulk opening splash page, and this is a really, really cool one. Like the detail of the webbing there under Spider-Man's armpit. That's something that some artists forget to draw in. It's part of his costume. Yeah, that's really, really good stuff. The work there by Madureira, Tim Townsend, and of course Steve Buccellato. So the title of the story is The Story of the Year. The creative team here, Scott Lobdell, the writer, Madureira on art, and Humberto Ramos, art assist. Now, he only does one page in this 23-page comic story. I'll point it out when we get to it. Tim Townsend on inks, Richard Starkings on Comic Craft on the digital letters, Steve Buccellato on colors, and that rounds out the creative team. So who's speaking off panel? Take a look at that. It's all there, the whole story in a single image. The pain, the pathos, the sound and fury, the rage, the arrogance. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, this one's worth 2,000. The Hulk versus Spider-Man, the story of the year. So the title of the story emerges from this speaker's dialogue, but who is it? Let's turn the page. It is Jonah Jameson. So he is giving a big speech, excuse me, to the staff at the Daily Bugle. But that was last year's story, he says. This year, today, it's all about mutants. So I wonder, is there a little kind of in-joke there about how in the past in Marvel Comics, you know, Spider-Man was the top tier character, but now it is the mutants, it's the X-Books. He continues and says, evolution's little joke on humanity, Homo sapien superior. And then a load of stuff that we already know about the X-Men, so on and so forth. And one of his underlings here, a reporter, says, but Mr. Jameson, sir, according to the news, the X-Men attacked first. This is in relation to X-Men 65. The first rule of journalism is don't believe what you see or hear from anyone else, least of all from television news. So this is intriguing stuff in the context of our current culture of 2025. J. Jonah Jameson speaking here in 1997, but every word he says as relevant then as it is today. I didn't become publisher of one of the nation's largest selling newspapers by reporting what I saw on TV, he says. I really like the way that his finger is stuck up there as he's making his point. Great expression on his face as well, those big black bushy eyebrows too. I like the way the mouth is rendered there in Madureira style. He continues and says, we're reporters, which means it's up to the Daily Bugle to get the story, the real story, not what some idiot with makeup and blow-dried hair tells us is the story. It means we do the research, we separate the fact from fiction. We make blasted sure every word we print is the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. That's why I became publisher, and that's what I live or die by. So Jameson there, full of conviction about what news reporting is all about. And he continues and says here, it's no secret that I'd be just as happy if every superpowered Yahoo in a mask and cape fell into an open volcano, because of course he has had from the very beginning a problem with Spider-Man. But that's not what that lunatic Bastion and his internationally endorsed zero tolerance is about. It's about witch hunts, scapegoating, violating civil rights. Most of all, it's about a reporter named Nick Bandoveris disappearing when he got too close to their connection with Graydon Creed. So he talks about Creed being dead too. Something about Bastion and his holy crusade stinks like yesterday's garbage. They've gone this far. There's no reason to assume they'll stop now. So Robbie Robertson there, thinking about Jonah, how he can be a judgmental son of a gun, but you have to give him credit for standing up what he believes in. So you can see there's a lot of speech balloons on these pages as Jonah continues with his speech. Ben Urich is on his way to Washington as we speak, trying to figure out what in blazes our elected officials are doing about all this, why some of them even support Bastion. The X-Men we think are called Cannonball and Storm, are being held somewhere by Bastion's men. Find them, he says. Ellis, get some reaction on this. Thunderbolts, if they're at home. See if anyone is still at Avengers Mansion. So, reference to the current super teams in the Marvel Universe. And squeeze a statement out of District Attorney Tower if you have to. And Yin, check with that egghead, Dr. Swan at Empire State University, on the authenticity of those satellite transmissions. It's a little too convenient. The images started after the X-Men's alleged attack. So Jonah Jameson there does have good instincts when it comes to separating the true from the false in respect of news reporting. It's just his opinion pieces regarding Spider-Man as a masked menace that's where his judgmentalism comes out, and also his prejudice. So he continues, he says, people are afraid of the X-Men, that's fine. Personally, I think we should be afraid of them. But when I see an all-out military operation like this, it is our duty to get all the facts. Got it? So they start answering him, yeah, then stop standing around here. We've got a newspaper to put out, people. It's a really good image of him there, with the mouth just really wide open. Then he asks Robbie, where's Parker? I sent him down to the CBNC studio to get a photo of Henry Peter Gyrich, the special federal agent attached to superhuman activities. So he was on TV in X-Men 65. And so this is all connected with the continuity of that. So this is happening just as Gyrich is probably finishing up that TV interview. Good. That's why I pay you the big money, Robertson. We're going to need a new headline, Jonah. Any preference? Says his editor. Yeah, call it Declaration of War, as he walks off into the shadow. So really good opening prologue to this issue. And there we get a really great anchor image of Peter Parker with his Spider-Man costume on under his civilian clothes, walking up or across the side of a wall. Okay, so that's our perspective up there. The hotel sign shows us it. Yeah, so he's walking horizontally across a vertical wall. So that's pretty cool. And really good image there by Madureira. I think Madureira really enjoys drawing Spider-Man. And it put me in mind, in particular in the upcoming pages, that it would have been great to see him, after his X-Men run, do Spider-Man for a few years. I think he would have really had a strong claim to being one of the most memorable Spider-Man artists, up there with McFarlane and Ditko and Romita Sr. and Romita Jr. if he'd done that. So anyway, it's Lower Manhattan. Peter's thinking there, this is nuts. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I don't think I'd believe it. The X-Men blasted out of the sky like common criminals. Again, a reference to the TV program from X-Men 65. What's worse, he continues, there's an awful lot of people who are happy about it. They're so scared of mutants that they automatically assume that all mutants are dangerous. But if people will stand for this, what's next? Registration, relocation camps? What if they come after me? What's the difference between being born with special powers and gaining them through radiation? And of course, long-time Marvel readers, in particular long-time readers of this title, Uncanny X-Men, can think back to Days of Future Past, issue 140 and 142 of the title, and the fact that Spider-Man was dead in the dystopian future of 2013, that he had been killed by the Sentinels. So that's interesting that he's thinking that, because that is the logic of where things would go. So here's Gyrich being driven out of the parking lot connected with the CNBC studios. Gotcha, thinks Peter to himself. So he gets the shot that Robbie sent him out to get. So that's good stuff. Also really like the kind of the acting here as he's pulling on his boots and then just dropping to the ground there. Or maybe it's on top of a garbage can. Yeah, really, really good stuff. And so he thinks here too, for a special agent for the National Security Council and supposed mouthpiece for zero tolerance, I'd say he looks almost depressed about it. And that's been established in prior issues, in particular of X-Men, that he's not 100% on board with Operation Zero Tolerance because, he's lost control of everything to Bastion. This is a great page. This is really a page that says to me that Madureira would have done a great Spider-Man run if he'd gone on to the title for 3 or 4 years, like a substantial run on the title that would be well remembered to this day. You can see what it would have looked like from a page like this. So Peter thinks maybe I'll follow Gyrich for a while. So he takes off his civilian garb and stashes it there in the sports bag with his webbing. So that's nice detail, DeLuca effect here as he is bounding around while taking off the civilian clothes. And he's thinking all the while about how the X-Men are good people, and it's not like I'm unfamiliar with being hounded and called a menace, but I can at least take off my mask and just be Peter Parker whenever I want. What do you do if you're born with wings or an optic blast that fires every time you open your eyes? If each time you went to the grocery store, you had to pray that nobody'd notice the peculiar shape down your back. So, Spider-Man is an interesting choice to bring into like the X-Men mythos and have this crossover, because exactly from the beginning Spider-Man was an outsider. Like he's not like Superman. You think about the kind of attitude to Superman at the Daily Planet. Lois Lane writes about him as a savior type figure, whereas at the Daily Bugle, because of J. Jonah Jameson's prejudice, Spider-Man is the masked menace. So he's an outsider, and the X-Men are outsiders too, and so he's got that empathy for them, and so it's interesting to see him. And also with his Spider-Man or his spider powers, there's a weirdness about Spider-Man that goes all the way back to the original Ditko, the way that Ditko drew him. There's something kind of creepy, horror-ish about Spider-Man that's very different from, of course, Superman. Another great Spider-Man page here from Madureira. Great anchor image here. You could imagine, again, just that run that never happened. It would be full of images like this. It would be so much fun. You can see also here a device of the period, like the thick black outline for an anchor image. I wonder, is it indicated in the pencils? Or is it something that Tim Townsend is doing with Madureira's okay? And so Spider-Man senses something with his spidey sense. You can see it indicated there in the colouring. And he says he's been warned about something, and it is the ground being torn up from underneath. So that's really well done there in the art too. Something's moving underground fast, tearing up the street, heading right at Gyrich's limo. So the limo's turned on its side, and inside there are two Secret Service security guys. They're huge hulking figures, and now they start talking with robot speech balloons. Agent Boyo, an ambush, program activation in progress. And the other one responds, operational parameters acknowledged, Agent Mathers. So Spider-Man is bemused, confused. He pulls Gyrich out of the limo because the two security guys don't bother with Gyrich. Not the most caring bodyguards in the world, eh, Mr. Gyrich, he says. And what does Gyrich respond as he fixes his shades? He says, they're Secret Service, you freak. They're professionals. Talk about gratitude. What am I? A volunteer, responds Spider-Man. And now we get the big anchor image here of Marrow and Callisto, who've emerged from the rubble in the street. So the tunnels under New York, remember the Morlock tunnels. So they've arrived up through one of those tunnels. But it's not explained how the street was ripped up. What's doing that? That we don't get an explanation of it. So Marrow here, again, this is a newish character in the X mythos, and she is coming on side with the Morlocks now, and she says to Spider-Man, we're not here to talk nicely, punk, to him. So she's got this aggressive attitude. I'm called Marrow, she says. Upworlders, my compatriot is called Callisto. So Callisto wearing a Joe Madureira designed costume now. We're here for you, Gyrich, she says. As a representative of Operation Zero Tolerance, you've effectively declared open season on mutants, and Marrow fills in as representatives of Homo Superior everywhere. We hold you accountable. So what are they going to do with Gyrich? Are they going to kill him? Let's continue with the story. Oh, here we get the one page by Humberto Ramos, and it's an interlude page, Somewhere Far Away. So you can see here there is some kind of industrial factory looking structure there. Otherwise, the landscape looks fairly arid and barren, but there's some water here, a lake, and Gambit is drinking from the lake. And he's saying that he's kind of, what would I say, like he's complaining about his lot, how he and the X-Men are fresh from saving an entire galaxy, only to get knocked off course on the way home by the mother of all spaceships. So that was in issue 345, we saw that. Of course, that's what I get by being Gambit, the X-Man, instead of Remy LeBeau, thief. When is the debt paid, Remy? So again, this is all build up to issue 350. When do I get back to my own life and leave well enough alone? And then in the lake, in the water in front of him, there's a shadow. So this is all done in the digital effects, and it looks like a big zebra head. So it'll be the next issue before we learn any more about that. And then we're back to the Joe Madureira art for the rest of the issue. So a little establishing shot there of the Daily Bugle. J. Jonah Jameson at his desk, raging with his fists up in the air. And he's on the phone to a US Senator, Senator Ralston. He says, you're telling me that some of your peers in the Senate have thrown their support behind a man with a messiah complex and no past, and you've absolutely no reaction to this? Well, what would you say if I told you that Bastion may have had one of my reporters killed? So we infer the senator's response. He continues, of course, I tried to speak to Robert Kelly, but he's been conspicuously silent during all of this. And I know the mutant crisis has always been his cause, but... And then, very eloquent, Senator. Can I quote you on that? So he must have gotten cursed out of it by the senator. Well, you can quote me on this, he concludes. Next election, I'm voting Republican. And slams down the phone and calls him a yutz. So there's someone in his office. Someone snuck in. Very dramatic, Jonah. So here we see Jonah in the shadows. How do you get in here? Questions. It's always questions with you, isn't it? But today I come bearing answers. Would have been better if this was on a page turn. It's Bastion the man himself. So what's he there for? He's there with a disc filled with information, and he says, don't speak too harshly just yet, Jonah, not before you see what's on that disc. So intriguing. And then we're back in Lower Manhattan, 30 blocks away approximately, and Callisto there racing towards Gyrich with her staff. You'll have to forgive Marrow, she says. Sometimes her youthful and passionate rhetoric tends to get away from her. For years we lived underground, modern-day Morlocks who felt we had no place on the surface world. There we thought we'd be safe from humans like you. Our intent here is not to kill anyone. We only want to make our voices heard. Now that dialogue doesn't exactly match the image that we're looking at, because she's about to whack him in the head with the staff, and Spider-Man gets in the way, grabs it, and makes a joke. Sheesh, does the term talk radio mean anything to you? And she replies, you should be fighting with a Spider-Man. You know as well as we do what it feels like to be hated and hunted and spat upon just because you're different. But Spider-Man hasn't let any of that darken his attitude to life. He says, all the more reason, lady, not to give in to anger. So what about Marrow? Well, she takes on, or rather she evades, leaps away from the attack of the two Secret Service machines, and then she throws her bone daggers straight at Gyrich, and of course Spider-Man there sees it. So let's turn the page and see whether any of those bone daggers connect with Gyrich. No, because Spider-Man grabs them with his webbing. That's a really nice piece of how will I put it? Like, I like the way that Gyrich is kind of pulling in his head back into his neck, away from the tips of those deadly daggers. And Callisto protests. Spider-Man, don't what, he says. It's a really nice image of him backflipping away from her. Don't stand by and watch her murder Gyrich. Bet that'd go a long way to promote genetic harmony between the races. And Callisto, this is good from Lobdell. In fairness, she is more strategic minded than the youthful, aggressive, passionate Marrow, and she thinks, this isn't going well. Was I deluding myself to think that after Sarah's encounter with Cable and Storm, Sarah is Marrow's real name, she'd been freed of her demons? So that's a reference to Cable issue 42. So with Mark Powers on board as editor of Uncanny X-Men, you're getting reliable editorial footnotes to other issues. Very different from the Bob Harris era, where you could never trust his editorial notes, footnotes, and that's when he bothered to give them. In any case, back here to the story, get to see some digital coloring effects as the Secret Service guys reveal themselves as Nimrod Sentinels. We have become Prime Sentinels, Nimrod Battalion. We are your executioners, they say to the mutants, Spider-Man. And coming on scene now, we have NYPD 2. And so the Sentinels attack there. Callisto running. I've witnessed too many deaths, lost too many of my own. I won't stand by and let it happen. And so she takes the blasts straight in the chest. But remember, she's wearing that armor. Get a nice top-down angle shot here. Nice shading as well there. It's tight hatching for the shading. Nicely done. And Marrow surprised. She took the blast that was meant for us. So Gyrich observes that she's still breathing. Spider-Man says, which means we can get her to a hospital. But Callisto demurs and says, don't worry about me, end this now. So they're going to have to deal with those Prime Sentinels, Nimrod Battalion. Back to the Daily Bugle, though, and the office of J. Jonah Jameson, and this back and forth between him and Bastion. So Bastion here appears to have the upper hand. J. Jonah Jameson saying absolutely nothing in this scene, as Bastion says to him, There's information of far greater consequence that I've as yet been unable to translate from the disc, but I will. Just think, Jameson, the monsters feared by the general public outed with what we believe are their civilian identities on the disc. It is the story of the decade, Jameson, Pulitzer Prize material, and I'm handing it to you on a silver platter. So this is the information he got from Professor X's computers in X-Men 65. And here he whispers into Jameson's ear, like a devil, what reporter could have given this to you? All you have to do is print it. So we have this final panel, the silhouette of the slats of the Venetian blind there cast on the wall. It's good stuff. And Jonah Jameson thinking, is he tempted? We don't know what he's thinking. Back to the street fight scene. Great colours on this page. And the Sentinels there saying they're going to go scorched earth. They're going to kill everyone and everything. So Spider-Man creating a webbing shield here to protect Gyrich on the ground. And he thinks to himself, whoever created these android guys, or whatever they are, sure knew what they were doing. Here's hoping there aren't any pesky Daily Bugle photographers around to snap embarrassing photos of our retreat, he says to Gyrich. In other words, duck. So that's funny stuff, of course, because the ace Daily Bugle reporter that gets the best photos of Spider-Man is, of course, Peter Parker, but it seems he hasn't set up his camera to capture any of this. Let's get past the advertisements here. And this is another nice panel. I like the way that he's kind of balancing there on the windshield of the squad car. Gyrich, is it safe to assume you didn't know these guys were some new form of Sentinels? So Gyrich wasn't in on that. He didn't have that information. Of course not, he exclaims. These men were considered two of our best agents. And then he realizes, my God, these two were the same two that were guarding Graydon Creed when he was assassinated. So now readers would be conjecturing whether Bastion had Creed assassinated in order to ramp up Operation Zero Tolerance and get the go-ahead for it. That it's all part of a master plan that encompassed murder. So, blasting away there at Spider-Man. I like the way that he's dodging up and away from those blasts. Now he's back to back with Marrow. That's really good stuff. And she says to him, or rather he says to her, I'd appreciate it if, just for the duration, you keep those bone daggers of yours out of my back. And so she says to him, I will if you tell me one thing. Why are you doing this? It has nothing to do with you. So here we get to the heart of why Spider-Man does what he does. You want the real answer or the witty rejoinder? As she says, either. The real answer is that a long time ago, I learned that with great power, there must come great responsibility. So, Uncle Ben's wisdom, going all the way back to Amazing Fantasy 15. What does Marrow have to say about that? The youth never appreciate the wisdom of the older people. A foolish motto to live by, she says. But the Sentinels, they're continuing with their programming, prepared to die, and suddenly they're blasted through their bodies. A bit like the T-1000 in Terminator 2, the way these rounds are going through their bodies. So Marrow's taken by surprise. She looks a lot like Rain Sinclair there in that particular drawing. My God, you shot them, says Spider-Man, for all the good it'll do. From the looks of these things, several rounds of ammo will only keep them down long enough. So it's NYPD's finest that have been shooting at the two Sentinels, including Gyrich there with a revolver. The Sentinels were as much or more a threat to public safety as the mutant they nearly terminated, says Gyrich. So that gets Marrow's goat. She's not happy at all. She's going to leap towards him again with one of those bone daggers. And of course, once again, Spider-Man's going to grab her and pull her back with his webbing, grabbing her by the ankle there. I like this little piece of dialogue that Lobdell has given the police officer here. This is what we get for spending all our shells on the Sentinels. That's pretty good. I like that he gave him something to say. Calm down, lady, says Spider-Man. Interesting device here of Madureira, putting Spider-Man and Marrow in silhouette, just with the exception of Spider-Man's eyes. Your friend is hurt, Marrow, he says to her, and that's bad. No one's going to argue that. But she was slammed trying to save your life, which means I'm not about to stand by and watch you throw it away. Got it? She replies, what I got, Spider-Man, is a reason to kill you too. It's hard to reason with her. And then back in Jonah Jameson's office, publisher's office at the Daily Bugle, he's had his think, he's lit his cigar, and he's going to take a drag on it. It's not that simple, Bastion. This is his response to the offer of the disc with the civilian identities of the X-Men. I'm already knee-deep working on my own story, have been for weeks, he says. Ever since you tried to scare me off of Creed a few months back. So again, we've got a reliable reference here from Mark Powers to Uncanny X-Men 339. It's all here on the computer under Bastion. Pretty impressive. There's nothing there, says Bastion. Exactly. Not a single page of reference on you. I find it pretty blamed curious that the man who has managed to ingratiate, intimidate and dominate his way into a position of power in over a dozen countries doesn't even seem to exist. I've been a reporter most of my life, Bastion. My gut tells me that you are the story. So that's really intriguing, and Bastion unhappy there with that. He doesn't want anybody learning his secrets. So another page of this. Bastion now is the one with nothing to say as Jonah Jameson continues. He says, I sent a reporter to Europe a few months back to try to uncover some facts about Graydon Creed, but he didn't make it back, neither did his story. Someone made sure of that. Someone who would do anything to promote a secret agenda. Someone who would kill to keep those secrets. Bastion says, you're destroying that information? No, I'm postponing it. So he sets fire to the disc with the tip of his cigar. And he continues and he says, I have every intention of learning everything there is to know about you, about your reasons for hunting mutants, and yeah, all about the X-Men themselves, but I have no reason to take the word of a murderer. The Daily Bugle's soul isn't for sale, Bastion. So here again, we come back around to J. Jonah Jameson's speech from the beginning. He continues and says, I'm not for sale. The printed word has tremendous power, and that power comes from the truth, not from someone's ability to twist that truth, to manipulate it for his own end. So all of what J. Jonah Jameson says here, and it's of course coming from Lobdell, as relevant as it was in 1997 as it is today in 2025. I like that shot of Bastion there. We're looking right up his nose. He's disgusted. He's got a look of disgust on his face, maybe even a little fear. Now, get the blazes out of my office, says Jonah Jameson, before I throw you out. And one more thing before you go, Bastion. I'll see you charged with Nick's murder. So that's his reporter that he mentioned from the beginning. At the beginning, and also that we saw murdered by Bastion in 339. Meanwhile, back in Lower Manhattan, we have Spider-Man there giving, finally, Marrow a pep talk. How do you know what I feel, she says, angry teenager. What? You're the first person who's ever been hated for being different? I'll let you in on a secret, Marrow. Even before I became Spider-Man, there was a very short list of people who genuinely cared about me, people who loved me. And so she's listening and she replies, so then why? Why help people who'd rather see you dead? And this is a great shot. You can see the emotion on his face, even though his face is beneath the mask. And he continues and says, because once, a long time ago, I got so wrapped up in myself that I lost everything. It's the burglar who would go on to kill Uncle Ben. So a reference to Amazing Fantasy 15. But interesting that Mark Powers doesn't give the reference, because there's something about Amazing Fantasy 15 that it should be on everyone's reading list, or everyone should be aware of it as the first appearance of Spider-Man and the full origin of his turn to heroism and away from making money from his spider powers. Again, interesting choice here to put Spider-Man in silhouette, except for the eyes. I don't want to see that happen to you, he says. And so she's listening, and her head is bowed. And if I've nothing to begin with, there's no such thing as nothing, Marrow, says Spider-Man. But interesting how the story ends. This is, carefully written by Lobdell. Also, just look at the width of Marrow's shoulders there. Huge. Anyway, it's all exaggeration. That is what we like in superhero comics. Let's get past the bullpen bulletins there. Gyrich, like he never stops. There he is with the revolver pointing it at Marrow. Touching, he says. If I'd both hands free, I might applaud. I'm not the biggest supporter of Operation Zero Tolerance in the world, but this woman is obviously a terrorist and I'm bringing her in. But Spider-Man isn't going to allow that. Nice try, Pete, he says, but I happen to know you're out of bullets. And that's because of his spider sense and the fact that it's not tingling. There's no bullets in the chamber. Let her go, Gyrich. Why? Because a masked vigilante tells me to? No, because she's learned something today. And if she does try to pull this kind of stunt again, I'll bring her in myself, says Spider-Man. And again, I like the way, it's the kind of convention of Spider-Man's costume that the eyes can close like that and narrow. It's really well done. Again, it goes back to the fact, or rather, my opinion, that it would have been nice for Madureira to have done a substantial run on Spider-Man. So Marrow picks up Callisto, who's wounded still from her heroic action earlier, and when one of the police officers says your friend needs a hospital girl, she replies, no, my friend, in quote marks, needs a healer. She needs to be among people who can help her. I'm going to bring her there, but then I'll be back. So she goes down the manhole, which is, I don't know, there's something about that that's funny. It reminds me, like, it's almost like something you'd see in the Muppets or something like that. It's funny stuff. I don't know, something comical about this. But in any case, Spider-Man here swings away. I like the way that he's swinging up out of the panel, like into the top right-hand corner. It's nicely done. And then the figures down here on the ground and mostly in silhouette. Let's all keep our fingers crossed that when you do, the world won't be as miserable a place to come back to, he says to Marrow. And now our last page. So Robbie Robertson comes into Jonah's office, puts out the fire, and he asks Jonah, who's saying nothing, who's mostly in shadow there, Jonah, nothing, Robbie, it's about, he says to him, whoa, Jonah, what's all this about? Nothing, Robbie, it's about nothing. And that ties back, like what I was saying there, with Spider-Man saying to Marrow with her question, if I've nothing to begin with, there's no such thing as nothing, Marrow. There's no such thing as nothing. That is to say here that Bastion, there being nothing on file about him, that's what, got J. Jonah Jameson's interest and what he's going to pursue, find out everything there is to learn about Bastion, who he is, his origin, his agenda, and expose him in the newspaper. And then I really like this, like the fin end, and then just a little winky eye there on the spider symbol. That's really good. And just a little, what would we call them, like action lines here for the wink coming off the Spider-Man face as well. Yeah, would have been great for Madureira to have done a Spider-Man run. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments section. 2 pages of letters here, nothing interesting. Next issue, the X-Men return from space, but to where? So we had a little hint of that in the one page that featured Gambit. This is intriguing. There's a Maverick special. Now, Maverick was quote-unquote hot in 1992 when Jim Lee had freshly created him, but then he kind of disappeared. And now he's got the legacy virus. When you're dying of the legacy virus, every operation is a suicide mission. So 48-page special there. And look at the artist, Jimmy Chung. So that's one of his earliest works at Marvel. It's a good image to sell readers on picking up the special. Then a load of stuff about Marvel Online, really kind of a slice of the late 90s there and the arrival of the internet 1.0. there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary of Uncanny X-Men 346. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments section. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.